Welcome to ANC's Connect, with me, your host today, TJ Maslela. In today's session, we're going to be discussing workers' rights and the conditions, the progress ANC's made in the past 30 years, and what to look forward to in the manifesto. Here to give us insight is none other than the president of COSATU, Ms. Zingiswa Losi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, always a pleasure. Can you give us a bit of a breakdown as to your journey? Yeah, let's start with your journey, going to COSATU after that.
Look, my journey is a journey of every black South African, a woman in particular. I was raised coming from Gqeberha now, known as Gqeberha in New Brighton and KwaZakele, raised in a family of 9. Got to know about politics at the age of 10, to be exposed to what is happening in our country. And I was involved in the youth struggles during COSAS, during the Youth League in the region. I then left and went to work in the National Defence Force in Air Force. I served there for 3 years, came back and I worked at jet stores. When I worked at Ford Motor Company, that's when I was able to join the trade union movement, because I understood the relationship between COSATU, that is the federation, and the ANC, and the South African Communist Party, and with SANCO. So there could not be any other federation that I would be a member of when I got introduced into the Metal Workers Union. And from there, I got elected as the second deputy president of COSATU in 2009. And in 2018, got elected as the president of COSATU and re-elected in the recent Congress of COSATU.
It's an extensive history. So you've obviously had exposure to different sectors, like you just indicated to us. Can you give us an indication as to what working conditions were at the beginning of democracy, 1994, or the extent to which you came into the working environment, and then where we are now? What are the current working conditions?
Look, having been exposed in my working life, to begin with in the Defence Force, where there was no trade union at that time when I was there, but also the rights of workers, everything is militarized. I had my worst experiences in the Defence Force based on race, based on gender, and moving that from that point to where I was at jet stores as a casual worker, having no fixed hours of work, earning 10 rands an hour at the time, and to where we are today, when we have the national minimum wage that has been introduced and no worker in South Africa can be paid less than 27 rand 58 cents. Where the rights of workers, now you have a right to join a trade union, where you can insist, because of the labor laws, to ensure that you are paid double time and time and a half when you work overtime, particularly on a Sunday and a Saturday. When you are able to get on maternity leave, because I had my first child before, and my second child before the new amendments, of course, of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act as it relates to maternity leave. At the time, what I had put in on my unemployment insurance fund, I had to withdraw for it in order for me to go on maternity and stay with the child at home. But currently now, with the new amendment, I don't have to do that. So when I make my contributions equally the same as my male counterpart, I don't have to be penalized for that, because I'm not tapping into what is there for me on the reserve in case I am unemployed. So there is a kitty where I am able to go on maternity leave and still be paid. And also the maternity leave now is not just 3 months, and also beyond that is that sometimes women do get pregnant but give birth to stillborns. They have miscarriages, and this is one of the new amendments where women are protected and their right to be mothers is protected, that even if you had a stillborn or a miscarriage, you are able to take on maternity leave. Same-sex marriages, same-sex couples, when you adopt a child that is less than 2 years, you can go on maternity leave and paternity leave as well. These are the things that were not there in the past and during my time when I started entering the labor market. But we see progress and huge progress currently now.
That's 28 Rand an hour, right?
It's 27 Rand 58 cents an hour now.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. You touched paternity rights. So now as a man now, I get to have leave when I have a child.
Indeed, indeed. And you get to spend time, you know, bonding with your child. Whether you have adopted the child or you have given birth naturally with that child, you having had your contribution. But the rights of fathers now are protected. You know, it is not just in the past. And in the past, you would know that if you are a father and you are a mother and you are working for the same company, it would be a choice who goes on maternity leave. Now, it is not about that. You are given your birthrights as a father to bond with your child. And these are the achievements that we have made and progress that we have made this far, of course, under the ANC leadership.
That's the progress we've made to date. What are some of the issues that COSATU is pushing forward or advocating for going into the new administration?
One thing that we must also celebrate, which would minimize the people resigning from work, particularly in the public sector, is the two-pot pension reform. You would recall that at some point, public sector workers in particular, on the annuitization of the pension fund, they did not understand it and how it was introduced in Christmas time by the former president. Workers had the fear and went to resign from work, public servants, particularly teachers. And because also workers do not have access to their money now, they must wait until they go on pension. The two-pot pension reforms and allows workers to have a savings pot and a pension pot where you put money on your pension pot for you to retire and you put money on your savings pot in order for you to be able to make withdrawals as and when you need it, to be able to pay your living expenses, your take care of your family without you having to resign from work. And this is one great achievement that we're looking forward to, and we want the 7th administration, the 6th administration to continue in the 7th administration for us to see through on the 1st of September. And this is one major victory that workers are really looking forward to. And this is the progress that the ANC government has done for us, and we are hopeful that when the ANC comes into power in the 7th administration, we shall continue with that act and ensure that it is implemented on the 1st of September.
One of the things you personally have been passionate about is not only seeing gender equality, but also transformation. Can you walk us through what that means?
For me, transformation means with not me having to rely on a quota system, you know, not me having to be looked into the gender lenses in order for me to be recognized that I do qualify for promotion, to lead organizations and companies in the labor market. For me, it means women being given their rightful place in the economy and in society without having to justify why. That's a complete transformation that we want to see. Currently, yes, we are grateful of the Employment Equity Act and the acts that are there that promote gender equity, but it is not enough. We think society needs to transform and understand that women are not an entity, you know. We do not want just to be protected by laws. We want society to understand that we are part of society. Actually, we are the ones that create society. We give birth, we nurture. And therefore, every young woman must grow up feeling secured and knowing that opportunities are there for them, not because they are young women, but because they are citizens of this country. And for me, transformation means a complete inclusion of women in society at all different levels, in all sectors of our economy, without having to politicize and justify that.
I know ANC and their policies have a 50-50% representation. For example, half of your cabinet must be 50% representatives in parliament, legislature, etc. In what you're saying, how would the transformation, what would the next step of transformation look like, given that the gender equality has somewhat already been achieved?
Is when we move beyond the 50%, is when it is okay for women to lead the cabinet. It is when we have accepted that we do not have to play politics in answering a question, are we ready for a woman president? It is when, for me, it is okay for you to have a minister and a deputy minister, both women leading strategic departments in our cabinet, without just being given responsibility, take the one for women and living with people living with disabilities. It is when women are allowed, because they qualify and because they are capable of leading JSE companies that are listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and even beyond. And they are CEO and CFOs of huge companies in our economy. And it is when women are able and young women allowed in their careers to be in the construction sector without having to have mentors that are coming from a big business that are led by men, and be allowed to exist because they have all the necessary experience and qualification and the zeal to drive this economy, to drive this transformation in our country. So for me, that's when we go beyond 50, and 50%. It's when we go beyond quota. It is when it is natural for us to accept that women do exist and women have a great role to play in our society and in the politics of our country.
Coming to the day-to-day, us as workers, COSATU, what's the constituency of COSATU? Who falls under that? Like, how do we define workers?
COSATU's constituency is constituted by all sectors of our economy. We have professionals, we have doctors, we have engineers, we have healthcare workers who are from the administration point of view in the health sector. We have social workers, all in that profession of health. You have also domestic workers. You have taxi drivers. You have security. You have farm workers. You have workers in the retail sector. You have workers in the clothing and textile and leather sector in the factories. So COSATU constituency is constituted by all sectors of our economy, from the private sector to a public sector, professional and including, because as much as some are not members of COSATU, but we call them more associates because we work with them to the extent of ensuring that they have a voice in the International Labour Organization in Geneva, where we talk about domestic workers, when we talk about workers that are in the informal economy, your street vendors. We speak to them, we organize them, we help them to organize themselves. We also speak to sex workers. We organize, ensuring that they have a voice. We advance the issues of, for example, the decriminalization of sex work in Parliament. We ensure that we bring them along to create space for them. So COSATU is a home for all workers in South Africa.
With that said, ANC's government's progress, how would you assess it in terms of your Employment Equity, Skills Levy Act, with those measures? Okay, walk us through what some of the measures are and how would you assess them?
We can say that we have made a huge progress. with the government led by the African National Congress. As I've said, we have the national minimum wage today that protects all workers in South Africa, that no worker should be paid below 27.58 rand. We have the Basic Conditions of Employment Act that we have just amended that extends the protection, including on the Occupational Health and Safety Act, that is inclusive now of domestic workers. That also has also brought in the Mine and Safety Act into the national legislation, because in the past it was not. Where traumas of the past in the workplace, you can now claim. If you have been working at the retail company, in the ShopRite, just to make an example, and you have been exposed to a lot of trauma, be it from the customers, or if you are able to say, since I started working here, this was a state of mind, and by now this is where I am because of different traumas, including health, if you are able to prove that, the Occupational Health and Safety Act says now you can claim for compensation and ensure that the employer takes responsibility for a rehabilitation of yourself. We also have the protection of domestic workers, because they work in the enclosed spaces that can be very violent, and no one can really prove, difficult to prove even abuse. That COIDA Act now, the Occupational Health and Safety, also protects domestic workers, understanding the environment that they are working under. We also have legislations that do protect public sector workers. For an example, and we're happy about the reversal, because we had to take a struggle even going to court on this issue, where public servants, including the municipal workers, when the government introduced the Municipal Systems Act, which wanted to prevent workers from being active in their political organizations. And we said it is unconstitutional. We even went to court on regards to that. And we're happy that Parliament is dealing with that and ensuring that we're able to have reversal on that matter, because you can't enact a law that is anti the rights that are enshrined in our Constitution. But there are a whole lot of legislations that have come to be, and COSATU has worked with the ANC, I must say, including on ensuring that we put the issues of ESCOM to protect workers, but also to protect our economy. We came up with an ESCOM social compact, and it was adopted in NEDLAC, and we have seen it in Parliament, and these are just a few achievements. Of course, we've got many that we can talk about.
You spoke about COSATU's relationship with the ANC. Can you outline for us the alliance and how the relationship between COSATU and ANC works in detail?
People will know that this alliance was not formed post-1994. It was formed through the struggle, way before even COSATU was given birth to in 1985. Our predecessors, COSATU and SAPTU, when the ANC went underground, when the ANC and the party was burned, it was COSATU and the UDF that stood up and kept the fires burning in South Africa. And beyond 1984, we had an opportunity then to define our alliance. And of course, we have spoken about the reconfigured alliance. That's when we talk about it and you want it to be in a piece of paper. But in reality, we have been reconfiguring the alliance, because what COSATU and our relationship with the alliance is defined about, it is about the influence that COSATU has at the legislative front, at the policy level. And we can say that the achievements that we have seen and the breakthroughs is as a result of us being able to sit down with the ANC at a political level and really speak to the transformation and the needs of people. The 350 social relief distress grant came during the time when South Africa did not know what is it that we're going to do, and the country had to be locked down. It happened because we had an alliance political council, the ANC, COSATU, and the SACP, met during that time of COVID and said, what are we going to do about those that are unemployed in our country? We have no UIF to tap from. And a 350 social relief distress grant came as a result. So this is what defines the influence that COSATU has and the relationship that we have with the African National Congress. That is political, but also translates into legislation and progressive legislation in our country. And this is just to sum up that relationship. We have challenges. We would always have challenges. We are organizations that are taking mandate from different constituencies to some extent. The ANC is sitting it's got business constituency, it's got workers, it's got communists, and COSATU represent pure workers. So there would always be those differences. But what we understand is that we would always have more influence, and the ANC is always biased towards the workers and through the relationship that it has with ourselves as COSATU.
And the upcoming elections, 29 May, what is being done by COSATU and ANC to get a Tando who's a lawyer or a Simpiwe who's an engineer? What's being done to engage with those guys, say, this is what we're offering you, and vote for us?
Well, we have worked on the election campaign. We have been with our constituencies, both organizations, and I think also the president of the ANC and officials of the ANC would have engaged professionals. COSATU, we continue because we represent them. They are members of our affiliates, as I've said. And we understand the appreciation of how far we have come. And we know a lot still needs to happen. And what we always encourage is activism in the workplace, in the areas where we are operating, as professionals as we are, because no man is an island. You know, we always say you can be a civil engineer and think that because you are highly qualified and therefore, and there's a constitution, everything else is gonna work out for you. But if you don't have a constituency and if you don't have a voice beyond just yourself, at times it becomes difficult because it depends on whom are you up against. And the private sector does not play. Those that have money, they don't play. If you are an individual, it's different than when you are a collective. And what we always say is that workers must always unite. Let's make sure that we become activists, we join trade unions in respective sectors. And if one does not exist, the Constitution says you can form one. If you see gaps, how do we work together? But also, how do we engage the government of the ANC collectively? And we are encouraging more engagements beyond what COSATU may start as a conversation. We want even professionals to begin to say, but wait a minute, we think and we appreciate what you have done, but we don't think our voice is loud enough on these matters. And I can tell you now, if you look, for an example, the issues of post office, we sit down with the deployees of the ANC in government and we say, we can't afford this, and what is the best way out of it? Respecting the processes of law that are undertaken, but can we look at the alternatives that we can pursue collectively and even then come up as a plan moving forward? So we're saying to the professionals, there is no other organization that has an ear in ensuring that your rights and your voice is amplified and is heard. Let us continue to engage. Let us initiate those engagements because they would understand more on what are the shortcomings in their respective field.
Okay, let's jump on the other side now. We have a Tinswalo, Hi Tinswalo, that has gone through ECD, basic education, higher education, tertiary education, through NSFAS, got school nutrition, is now a graduate, has been fortunate enough to get a job and as a professional, what is the role that Zingiswa now has in shaping the future of SA?
Firstly, I would say it is for them to plow back. We won't be able to move forward as a country if once I am at the top, then I think it is done. It is when I plow back to my community. It is when I create more of the Dinzwalos, of the next generation. Remember, I am a Dinzwalo of a particular generation because one generation existed before me and created the pathway. And we would want to say those that have been given opportunity, they should also create the Dinzwalos of the next generation. That's how Ubuntu is about. That's how, as Africans, we are raised, you know. And it must never be enough. It must never end with you, with me. It must always be a continuous journey of transformation and liberation for the next generation.
No, generally, I'll give you an example. This past weekend, I was engaging with friends, and you'd find a professional who, I don't know, it doesn't understand how ANC or this democracy has impacted them, and is disillusioned as to why vote ANC. What's the message you would give to that worker that feels disconnected or disillusioned?
Well, firstly, we always say that sometimes, generally, as human beings, we look at what have I personally gained. And sometimes it may not be me directly now, but it may be everyone else in my family. It may be my grandmother who is able to receive the old age grant timeously. It would be my niece that is going to a free education, able to access that, getting meals during break times at school, government school, without having to pay. It will be that child in my neighborhood who is coming from a family that is getting free water, free electricity. It would be me as a professional, as a worker, who in the constitution of this country, my rights are already locked in there, protected even under the Bill of Rights. It will be me having directly benefited as an individual through the labor laws in our country that are friendly to the workers. The only thing that I need to do is to familiarize myself, tap into that and say, this is what 30 years of democracy has done for me. When I get into a workplace and I find that I am discriminated, I must know which law to pick and use to fight against that discrimination. Already the ANC government in the 30 years have laid the foundation to protect workers. It is us now who must use those legislatives to then say, under this Employment Equity Act, under this act, these are my rights. Under the Constitution, these are my rights, and the employer cannot do anything except to comply. And when there is no compliant, there is the CCMA that has been created for dispute mechanism. If I'm not happy, there is the labor law. I can even go and appeal in the Labor Appeals Court. I can even go as far as the Constitutional Court. These are the bases and the foundation that the 30 years of democracy has given to us as workers. Ours is to just exercise those rights that we have and ensure that we protect ourselves using that and expose employers who continue to treat us as modern slaves.
What is the stance of ANC and COSATU with regards to immigration, both legal and illegal?
Our constitution says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Firstly, we have to understand why people migrate. Of course, we want every citizen or every person that is in our shores to be documented, because it's got not just legal implications, but cost implications as well. How do you budget? But also for law and order, who is here? you know. We see crime being committed. We see when police are looking for fingerprints, they don't know who the person is. It means that person may be a person that is not documented, but in our country. So it's going to be important for us to ensure that our borders are working. We're happy with the border management agents to ensure that everyone that comes into South Africa is documented. But we also understand that the South African government has also allowed people who left their countries because of war, who are seeking asylum. There's a process for that. What we only want is for people to follow the law, ensure that you are documented, so that even when we cut the budget and we say for health purposes, we must understand the population that we have in South Africa. Also, we will be able to deal with illegal mining and a number of things that are working against progress that we should be embarking on as a country. So ours is about protection of citizens and everyone that is in our shores. But we must always follow the law. We must also, because as COSATU we always say that, let us find solutions not just for South Africa, but for the region and for the African continent. Because people will continue to migrate for as long as others are not happy with the political situation that leads to an economic disruption in our country. They will move. And where will they come is to the south, because of the progressive laws that we have and what South African government is doing in building the economy. It attracts workers. It attracts the working class from other countries who are running away from the instability that takes place in our country. South Africa now, we must do more. Yes, I think we are making interventions in the region, but I think we still need to do more to ensure that the stability in the African continent at large, so that we build Africa as Africans, and we will begin to appreciate the borderless Africa, because we are able to trade with one another, but also there is no forced migration. Because migration, we must say, others is a choice, others it is because of the conditions that people are finding themselves in. But let's follow the laws. Let's ensure that everyone is documented, whether it is through asylum or because you are here as a professional, you are coming here to work. For that, to avoid the disaster that we've seen in George, to avoid exploitation of migrant workers in South Africa, to ensure that the labor laws are protected, because what we've seen in George under the DA administration is workers there having paid 10 rands a day, not an hour, a day. Workers going home with 100 rands a day. No Conditions of Employment Act is followed, no occupational health and safety. People are not documented, people are not known, because people are settling for anything because of their status in the country. And that is used by employers to exploit them and against them. That if you demand these rights, then we are going to report you and you are going to be sent back home. But if you are documented, even if you are an asylum seeker, you have a right to find employment. But let us ensure that we follow the laws in South Africa so that you are protected as a migrant worker as well. You have the equal rights as a South African citizen has, enshrined in the Constitution and in our laws.
Yeah. So let's take it back to, okay, we'll start by saying, a lot of what you spoke to the second priority of the ANC's manifesto, which is basically building an inclusive economy, expanding. What do you now say to Mbali, who is a waitress? And fine, we understand that ANC has put in place the quota in terms of number of South Africans that must be employed versus foreigners. But what do you say to Mbali that, why should I vote when I see foreigners taking my job and being exploited, like you're saying? What is the plan to deal with that and to address Mbali's concerns?
Firstly, we must say that workers must be unionized, whether they are migrant workers or not. Secondly, in the unions, we have to enforce employers to adhere to the law. It is our responsibility also as trade unions. If there's, as you say, there's a quota, how many workers are here, how many are South Africans, what does the law say? And we ensure that the employer is adhering to those laws. It is not workers who must implement the law. It is the employers that must implement the law. So Mbali must then say, we are all workers here, but how many are South Africans? Because these are not scarce skills. And what is the law saying? And go to the trade union in that workplace and say, I'm not against this worker, but we seem to be 90% of migrant workers and 10% of South Africans, and we are not addressing the law. And make the employer to account. Because at times we want to ask these difficult questions and want to respond to them and think that we are implementers of, we're not even enforcers of the law. And then call on the Department of Employment and Labor to then enforce the law. So ours is to ensure that the law is adhered to, both by the employer and it is enforced by the Department of Employment and Labor. Ours is to steward over that and ensure that no worker continues to be exploited, but also South Africans are given also the priority to the jobs that are created in our country, exactly in terms of the law. So we don't want to create friction between workers and amongst workers, but the law must be followed. And sometimes the tendency is for the Mbali to fight with Sipogas instead of both addressing the perpetrator, that is the employer. So we just have to ensure that we are organized, we are unionized, we tackle the employer, we tackle the Department of Employment and Labor for enforcement, we ensure that we are part of the inspections that are taking place and make everyone to account.
The details for all of the agencies listed will also be added in the bio for you guys' convenience. Now, beyond the elections, what's COSATU's vision and how are you guys going to go about ensuring that workers' rights continue to be heard?
Beyond elections, we're working flat out for the victory of the ANC. We trust no other political organization except the African National Congress to continue in advancing the rights of workers in our country. We will continue to work with the African National Congress beyond elections to ensure that what is in the manifesto is realized. Because it's something else to have it on a paper and you read through it and there is no implementation. Ours is to hold the African National Congress and its government, as we always do, because we're the only federation in alliance with the ANC, but that is able to hold the ANC government accountable. We're not shy about that. And we will continue to do so. But we are saying to workers, there is no other political party that has done so well in advancing the rights of workers. We don't want to talk about others, but people can hear the voice of those that are anti-workers, going for workers to continue to be slaves, continue to sell their labor with no protection. The ANC has advanced these rights and these protection. And it is the only political party, and we are saying beyond these elections, we will work with the ANC, as we always do after every election, to ensure that there's accountability, to ensure that the ANC, when it puts its 7th administration, it also has the right cadres who understand the contract that the ANC has signed with the people of South Africa through its manifesto. And that those manifesto priorities, we can only build South Africa when we implement them, when we hold people to account, when we fight corruption in our country, when we fight crime, when we ensure that business in this country is also held to account, that you do not wake up and say, because the price of platinum has gone down and therefore 4,000 workers must leave. And when there is a boom in the price of platinum, the capital, big capital, decide to share the profits amongst themselves and forget that it has just sent home over 10,000 workers and 100,000 of families going into poverty. And we are saying, working with the ANC government beyond elections, we will make sure that there's accountability and also the implementation of the manifesto.
So for those that have listened to this conversation and, I don't know, somehow not getting it, or, yeah, somehow not getting it, what is the importance of making that mark on the 29th of May?
The importance is so significant that how we are going to move forward with the transformation agenda depends on that vote on the 29th of May. And not just a vote anywhere, not a spoiled ballot, not a vote to those that have never had experience of governing, not a vote to those that when they could not get their way in the ANC decided to leave and form alternatives because personally there are things that they were in disagreement with that have all to do with themselves and not about our people. The ANC has not just said this is what we're going to do, it has done it. 30 years of democracy, from over 300 years of colonialism in our country and oppression. We're just saying 30 years, we have done so much. We have a long way to go. And the ANC is fit for the purpose. It is cleansing itself. We see the results and the outcomes. It has taken the people of South Africa very seriously. It's hearing us. There will be challenges, but on the 29th of May, it's going to be important for us to cast our vote on the first ballot on the ANC, the second ballot, the ANC, the third ballot, the ANC, for us to continue with the transformation agenda and that the ANC government has been on the path of. Failure to do that, we will be handing South Africa to see what is happening in Kleinfontein, to see what is happening in Orania, to become a state of South Africa. We cannot afford to have an Orania that is the entire South Africa, a Kleinfontein that is the entire South Africa. We have come too far to give up now. We need this. This is significant as 1994 was. A South African government led by the ANC, and the ANC government needs another opportunity. We need to give it another time. We have to work with them. Everyone has a responsibility. The private sector cannot now, because now they want to close their operations. They are saying they are leaving, they are going to Botswana to mine there, they are opening elsewhere, because people do not want to be held accountable. They are taking our monies, they are taking money, they are leaving South Africa. They are not taking part in transformation agenda because they do not want the ANC to win. We are saying to the people of this country, only the African National Congress can advance the interest of particularly the black majority in our country. Let us give it another opportunity on the 29th of May. Ballot 1, vote ANC. Ballot 2, vote ANC. Ballot 3, vote ANC. On the 30th, we must have a new government of the African National Congress.
So there's this narrative by workers that ANC sold out to big businesses. Big businesses come back and say ANC is overregulated. What's COSATU's stance?
Look, there is no over-regulation in terms of our legislation, our labor laws. A big business can hire and fire. They do not have to really say, I'm unable to fire this person. Actually, workers have lost more jobs. And where is the over-regulation? Where is the rigid there? Sibanye is going to be dismissing and retrenching workers over 4,000. If it was rigid, they would not. It would have been difficult. So it does not make sense. The labor laws are here to protect workers and also including ensuring that there is a conducive environment of coexistence between labor and big business in our country. So it regulates that relationship. It does not over-regulate it. We have the CCMA. The reason why we have the CCMA, it is exactly to ensure that when there is unfairness in the labor law, in how you execute that, the CCMA is there to conciliate and mediate over that. So there is protection. There's a right to strike and there's a right to lock out. When businesses so feel, they do exercise the right to lock out. And you would have seen also in the metal industry where workers were on strike, and when they wanted to go back, I think in the engineering or motor, employers started to say we're locking out. So when it suits business, they know what is in the legislation and how it works for them. It is when they want to exploit workers and the legislation protects the workers from exploitation. And this is what they don't like. So we're saying pay 27.58 rand, that's the national minimum wage. They're saying, well, it's going to kill jobs. So allow us to pay what we want to pay, which is a slave wages. But also allow us to pay ourselves exorbitant salaries and benefits and bonuses without considering the 10 million that is unemployed. So it is the worker that must sacrifice the salary, the wages, to create another employment of another worker in terms of how business thinks. But it is not for management and the CEOs to sacrifice their big exorbitant salaries in order to create the 10 million jobs that South Africa needs. So the legislation in this country, it is okay. It regulates. It sets the minimums. So if then you are arguing that it is over-regulated, it means yours is about exploitation, clearly. Because you can do more, but it says you can't go below here. And so how do you build an economy where people continue to work and they can't live? Where workers can't even buy the products that they are producing, they can't consume them. How do you call that when workers don't have the buying power of the same product? When workers can't even, they must borrow to come to work and continue in a debt cycle, and yet big business is buying houses and offshore investment outside this country, going on holiday is more than a salary of one worker. So how do you call that over-regulation? Also, the narrative that the ANC government is more in favor of big business, it is not true, because then the ANC government would not have set the regulations to protect workers. We have a responsibility, I must say also, as trade unions, to ensure that we are holding big business accountable for non-implementation of the gains that we have attained as workers in this country. It is our responsibility as shop stewards in the workplace to protect and defend workers that have elected us. I always say, shops, you are a first line of defense. So we have that responsibility equally so. But we are not over-regulated. We are regulated to ensure that there is fairness in the labor market.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope that it was insightful and that you learned a lot, enough to make you make your decision on 29 May. For more insights, follow us, links below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Most importantly, comment in terms of what you liked, didn't like, views, and also what you would like to hear from us.